Now the local governments are no better than the federal government. They're spending money just as wildly and as ambitiously as the federal government's doing.
Well, I think the crux of the problem is that there's a lack of citizen involvement on the local level. We're busy raising families and going to work, and our attention is not on local governance, and so the local government is doing whatever the heck they want to do, and the citizens are not calling them to account.
Throughout history, there has generally been a lone figure who dares to take on the enemy of the age. When that person demonstrates leadership, it inspires others to join the effort, ultimately leading to success for the entire community. Our guest today, Lance Lamberton, decided he had had enough of government overreach in Cobb County, and he determined to take a stand against it. Lamberton is the founder and chairman of the Cobb Taxpayers Association, and he has worked tirelessly to reduce taxes and government spending at the state and local levels. Lamberton worked previously as deputy director of the White House Office of Policy Information during the first President Ronald Reagan term. As chairman of the Cobb County Taxpayers Association, he played a key leadership role in opposing the 2005 and the 2011 Cobb County Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax referendums, as well as the regional Transportation-SPLOST, which Cobb County's voters rejected by 69% in opposition. Lamberton resides with his wife in Austell, Georgia, and he works as a media relations consultant for VNR1 Communications. He is personally responsible for saving taxpayers in Cobb County and beyond billions of dollars. Join us for a conversation with Lance Lamberton. All right, we've got Lance Lamberton. Thanks for joining us, and we really appreciate you taking out some time to have this interview with us. And Lance, one of the things that we love to do is we love to highlight our local economies throughout Georgia. So we always ask people that we interview if they would like to do a shout out to a local business in their area. Do you have one that you'd like to acknowledge?
Yeah, there's a Frog Brewery in downtown Austell, and it's been around for about a year or so. It's a new business, and they offer a lot of craft beers that they actually brew on site. And it's kind of a really welcome addition. I enjoy going there at early evening hours and getting together with friends, and it's a very very convivial environment. And so if you're in Austell, I would recommend you go there.
Awesome. Great. Thanks. And I know they appreciate it. Hey, on your website, you list yourself on the Cobb Taxpayer Association website. You are listed as a taxpayer activist. What do you consider to be a taxpayer activist?
Well, my activism in the taxpayers movement kind of coalesced in 1979 when I started working for the National Taxpayers Association, and the National Taxpayers Union, NTU. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Right.
Anyway, we were very involved in trying to not only fight local and state taxes and try to fight against the growth of government and encroachment upon our wallets and our pocketbooks, but also the big effort that we were involved in was trying to get a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So I worked there for 2 or 3 years. I worked for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce following that. And at that point in time, Ronald Reagan became president of the United States. And through my contacts and connections, I eventually became the White House Office of Policy Information under Ronald Reagan. And from there, I could talk to you forever about this, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I also, after I got back into the private sector, I set up an organization called New Jerseyans for a Balanced Budget, and we also were trying to get a constitutional convention call to enact a balanced budget amendment under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution. And I've been involved in local and statewide and countywide taxpayer issues ever since.
Was there a particular issue that caused you to create the Cobb Taxpayer Association?
Yes, 20 years ago in 2005, I read an article in the Marietta Daily Journal, and they were talking about raising our sales tax through what you call the SPLOST, Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax in Georgia. And it was currently at that point, it was like 5%. And they wanted to increase it by a percentage, bring it up to 6%. And they said something when they had this retreat, and they said, well, doing this is a no-brainer. And I said, well, I have a brain, and I don't agree. I don't agree that we need this tax increase. So I launched a campaign against it. We lost by only about 117 votes out of 40,000 cast. But that was the beginning of my local political activism in the area of taxes. I mean, just let me emphasize something. I'm a libertarian. I think the government is too big and it costs too much, that we are spending our posterity into bankruptcy. And I'm very, very concerned for the future generations of this country. The role of government on all levels has exceeded any reasonable expectation. And so I am committed to reining in government power, government authority, and government taxes and spending. That's my mantra.
And the saddest part of the demise, especially of the federal deficit, is we've done it to ourselves. We've elected the people who have gone in and spent more money than we bring in, and they continually run up the debt, run up trade deficits, and we've done it to ourselves, essentially.
And you know, it doesn't matter who's in power, whether it be the Republicans or the Democrats.
Right.
The Republicans are maybe a little bit more fiscally responsible than Democrats for the most part. You know, I would definitely prefer to have, you know, President Trump over President Biden. But nonetheless, this latest big, beautiful bill is good on the taxing end of the ledger, but has done very little in with relation to spending. And let me just say something about spending, Steve. When you're in Congress or if you're in the state legislature or whatever it might be, you're under enormous pressure to spend money on behalf of special interest coalition. There's very little pressure coming from the other side. Basically, all of the people in the you know, or taxpayers, are saying like, you know something, this beekeepers indemnity program is something that I don't think we should have any longer. But guess what? The beekeepers are very well entrenched, and they will fight like crazy to keep their indemnity, which is basically a beekeepers indemnity program under the Department of Agriculture basically guarantees that if they run inefficiently or if they have a bad year, they don't lose money. They're compensated by you and me, the taxpayer. So
right.
It's very, very frustrating. I know that David Stockman and a lot of strong fiscal conservatives, he used to be head of the Office of Management and Budget. We fought very, very hard. When I was in the Reagan White House, we fought very, very hard to reduce government spending by reducing waste, fraud, and abuse, which is enormous. I mean, it was enormous then, and it's even worse now.
Well, I think the shocking part about it today is, like, if you look at all the USAID and all the other spending, especially with the Defense, Department of Defense, all the black ops money that we have no idea where the billions and billions of dollars are going. And they actually admit it now, but they still spend it. It's like it's like they're on heroin or something and they're addicted and they can't get off of it. And they admit, yes, I have a problem, but I need a fix again.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't put it better. And it's a real problem. And the thing is, Steve, I don't know what the solution is. I would think that I'm a very strong advocate of having a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution and term limits. And the only way we can ever get that done is through a constitutional convention under Article 5 of the Constitution, because Congress is not going to do it on their own.
Right.
I've been hitting my head against the wall for decades to try to get that to happen, and it just hasn't happened. So I'm a strong supporter of what they call the Convention of States. So that's my little plug.
Well, we first got to know each other back in 2012 when the state tried to build these regional sales taxes. Like that's all we needed was another type of sales tax. We already have local sales taxes. We already have state sales taxes. We have the federal tax on gas and some other things. That's all we needed was another tax. And they were trying to impose that on us. And we got together and with a bunch of other people and we fought it. It was a grassroots fight. And most of the transportation projects that they proposed, 50% of it was going to mass transit projects, which wouldn't have done anything for traffic congestion. The numbers were slowly decreasing on terms of ridership for the mass transit operators. And so we got everybody in metropolitan Atlanta in our region. Every county voted it down. And I just thought that was monumental. And I think it's a testament to what you're doing with the Cobb Taxpayers Association and some of these other groups that are saying, we're not going to take it anymore.
Well, in Cobb County, you're talking about they call it the Transit-SPLOST, and it was going to increase our sales.
Well, this was the T-SPLOST in 2012.
I think it was called Transportation-SPLOST. That's what it was, labeled as, right? And it would have increased the sales tax in Cobb County from 6 to 7%, and also to all the other counties.
Right.
And it got voted down in Cobb County. It got voted down by a 2-to-1 margin, and I think the margins were also equally as robust in some of the other counties as well.
Right.
And one of the problems with this whole proposal is that they finally had to admit that if it passed, it wouldn't reduce congestion. I mean, the whole purpose, their selling point was it's going to reduce congestion. Trying to get people in metro Atlanta out of their cars and into public transit, it ain't going to happen. There are things that we can do to reduce congestion. I mean, I love the along 595, you have the Peach Pass. You've got a special lanes that you can take during rush hour going to and from, and you pay a little bit extra, but it reduces congestion on the major thoroughfare if you choose to pay for it, and it actually works very, very well. So there are private sector, public-private partnerships that can be employed to reduce congestion, but no, it was a failed proposition from day one.
Well, and the saddest part about that tax, that regional tax that they wanted to impose, and a lot of the county transportation SPLOST, special purpose local option sales taxes, is that they end up having such a huge number. In 2012, the number was, I think, $6.5 billion. And what happens is it becomes a circus because they just start trying to find projects to build. It's not necessarily what are the projects that are going to solve our transportation congestion issues. They have so much money because of these types of things that they literally are just throwing plans out of a file drawer onto the table and saying, we'll build this and we'll build this and we'll build this. And it makes no sense at all. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason, to what they're trying to do in terms of the amount of funding versus what they want to build.
Well, you have to understand, and I hate to be cynical about this, but there are very powerful, well-connected spending interests that will get a lot of profit and a lot of money by building these projects. And in the SPLOST that we have here in Cobb County, some of the projects are good and necessary and needed, and a lot of them are wasteful. And the reason they're wasteful is because the state law requires that it has to be a full 1%. One of the things we tried to do a few years ago, working with the Americans for Prosperity, is we tried to get a bill introduced where a county could opt to say, maybe we don't need a full 1% tax increase. Maybe we can do 0.5% or 0.25% or whatever to pay for things that are really needed and necessary, but we don't have to pay the whole full 1%, which then you have to make up projects, to fill that amount. So
and that's what they end up doing. And the saddest part is they start developing projects. Let's just say, for example, recreation projects. They want to build these large recreational facilities. Well, nobody brings up at the time that, when they're telling the public about these facilities that they want to build, that they require staffing, that you've got to hire, 365 days a year. There's maintenance on that facility. There's upkeep. There's upkeep on and paying the utilities and all sorts of things, that associated costs that never get factored into the discussion when you're looking at some of these SPLOST referendums.
Sure. I mean, I couldn't say it better. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you expand these facilities, then the SPLOST is not going to pay for the facilities. How it's going to be paid is going to be paid out of general revenues, which is property taxes. So, you really have to think about that before you go ahead with these types of things, because it's going to increase the tax burden on the American people. And I want to make one point. I was born in 1950, so I'm an old guy. All right. Since I was born, the tax burden on the average American has increased by twice. That's how much. It's actually more than that now. I used to use that statistic a few years ago. So if your tax burden as a family of four in 1950 was so much of a percentage of your income, now it is double. Now, our standard of living has increased a great deal since 1950 because of technology and because we're making more money. But since we're making more money, we're paying a lot more. Wouldn't it be nice if the tax burden as a percentage of our income was constant from 1950 to now? Do you imagine how prosperous we would be?
Absolutely.
So the government doesn't create wealth. The private sector creates wealth. All the public sector does is it spends your money.
And they don't even do it efficiently. That's the saddest part about it. And they don't. Yeah. And they don't care. One of my biggest things when I talk to constituents through my political career over 20 years was that I said, the government always gets their money. There's no incentive to reduce costs, build efficiencies, anything like that. There's no accountability because they're always going to get their money. They know they don't have investors that they have to please. They don't have profit margins that they have to adhere to. They're just going to keep getting more money from you. And there's nothing that can stop them. They're the authorities. They have the guns, and you have to pay or you face a penalty.
It would be nice if we could build into the system incentives for public servants to reduce spending. And therefore, if they could reduce their budgets and their departments, that department heads and whatever would get a bonus for that. And I've advocated that for a long time. I don't know why we can't do that. I mean, saying, hey, I can cut my such and such a budget in such and such a department by 20% by introducing certain efficiencies, and in return for being able to do that, I get a huge bonus as a result. Wouldn't that be cool? That's what the private sector does. Well, that's what the private sector does. So I'd like to see that built into the system. I hope Elon Musk is listening.
Well, there's nothing wrong with an incentive for them to do the right thing. Right now, there's no incentive to do the right thing in most local governments. Hey, and let's talk about Cobb County.
I'll get to that for a second. But the incentive is to increase your budget and increase the number of people that you have, because then that puts you on a higher level in the governmental bureaucracy, and therefore that's how you get paid more money.
Yeah. And let's talk about Cobb County, because Cobb County used to be a absolute bastion of conservatism for so many decades. And now we've seen the shift from ultra-conservative board of commissioners to a 3-seat Democrat majority on the board. And it appears this new majority just loves to spend, and spend. What's your comment on that?
Well, I think the most egregious example of what you're talking about is when they put on the ballot in November the so-called mobility-SPLOST. Have you ever heard about that? And what it was is that they wanted to increase our sales tax by 1% for 30 years at a price tag of $11 billion. Okay? And then there'd be extra money from the federal government or whatever. And I spearheaded an effort to defeat that, and we were successful. The vote totals at the end of the day was 62% no and 38% yes. So we won a major big victory. The only problem is that the people who advocate for this, that 3-person majority on the commission, they were backpedaling and saying, well, we're just going to have to, look at maybe repositioning ourselves, and maybe, they want to kind of repackage it and
Right.
present it to the voters again. And they've done that in Gwinnett County 3 times. And it was a bill that was passed, HB 930, and I'll expect you to remember that. But it was Brandon Beach, a Republican, state legislator, introduced this legislation, and as a result of the 2018 HB 930, it was put on the ballot to increase sales taxes for mass transit 3 consecutive times, and it was voted down each and every time. So one thing I want to bring to the attention of your viewers is that we are trying to introduce amendments to that legislation so that if it gets defeated, it can't be put back on the ballot for at least another 10 years. Otherwise, if you keep on bringing it back on the ballot 2 years and 3 years and 4 years later, it's basically saying, screw the voters. We don't care what you did 2 or 3 years ago. We're just going to keep on bringing it on the ballot and bringing it on the ballot, and eventually we'll wear you down. And once it's passed, it's done deal, and we are stuck with it. So we need to have some sort of a legislative reform, and I'm working to make that happen. I'm working with the Cobb GOP to get them to pass a resolution to implement that resolution, and therefore try to get some state legislators to sponsor a bill like that. What do you think of that?
No, I think you're onto something. And, it's just astounding that with the mobility SPLOST that Cobb County attempted, $11 billion. I mean, just imagine. And here's the thing. Who gets the $11 billion? That's what we need to ask, Lance. It's all the engineering firms that are lobbying those board of commissioners. It's all the highway construction people. It's all the people who sell the mass transit equipment, the buses, the trains, the light rail trains, the tracks. I mean, all these people are throwing all kinds of money into lobbying for this type of thing, and it won't do a bit of good. And you have spent $11 billion, pulled it out of the economy, where it could have gone into goods and services in your local economy, and you'll almost have nothing to show for it. It's pathetic. So we desperately need legislation like what you're talking about.
Well, I couldn't put it better. One thing I'd ask your viewers is if they are confronted with a similar referendum or proposal to increase taxes on the local or county level or whatever it might be, and if they have fire in the belly to defeat it, it can be done. I used to live by the slogan, well, you can't fight City Hall. Well, actually, I was wrong. You can fight City Hall. And I want to inspire your viewers that if something like this is coming across the pike in your community, it can be done. It's hard work. You have to be disciplined. You have to be organized. There's a number of things you need to do, but if you care passionately enough about it, you can defeat these kinds of proposals. And I can tell you that the personal reward that I feel from being able to defeat this, I can't quantify. It was so satisfying to defeat this on behalf of the taxpayers of Cobb County for the next 30 years. I've saved them, not me personally, but the organization that I built. We saved them $11 billion in wasteful, extravagant, and counterproductive spending.
Yes. And I'll even up your total there, because with the work that you did on the 2012 T-SPLOST and the 2005 and the 2011 SPLOST in Cobb County, and including this $11 million M-SPLOST package that was just defeated, I think you're around $20 billion that your organization has worked to save taxpayers in Cobb and in other counties. $20 billion. I think that's astounding. And it's a testament that you can change things, you can work for good, you can fight City Hall, like you said, and you can, hit them over the head with the common sense baseball bat and make them understand that they've got to stop doing these stupid proposals.
Well, I think the $20 billion figure is probably a little exaggerated. I don't know if I want to give you that much credit because some of the things that we fought, we lost. But certainly with the 2012 called the T-SPLOST and with the M-SPLOST, you put those together, maybe close to $20 billion. I don't know.
That's $17 billion, just the two of them.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll take your numbers.
Well, let me ask you this: you actually, during the M-SPLOST episode, you actually filed ethics charges against the Board of Commissioners chairwoman Lisa Cupid. What was all that about? What was that situation?
Well, here's my issue with Chairwoman Lisa Cupid on this: is that they were putting out videos and information, quote unquote, information about the M-SPLOST, which was clearly, without any doubt in my mind, and without anybody who would watch it, was clearly advocacy. It was not information. It's perfectly okay for the county to say, if this thing passes, then this will happen. This is like, we'll spend the money on this and we'll spend the money on that. But the way they packaged this information they put out on their website, very slick, sophisticated videos, was clearly like, I mean, I don't have the exact, words in front of me, but it basically says, look at how this is going to liberate us and free us, and it's going to be so great. It's going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. It was as good as a commercial if I wanted to buy cereal or coffee or whatever. It was advocacy, and I don't like taxpayer dollars being used to advocate for this type of option. I was incensed. The ethics committee, they ruled against me. Maybe I needed to present a little bit more cogent, or I'm not a lawyer, and so the information I put forth was maybe not as bulletproof as it should have been. But I think the cards were stacked against me because the ethics board, the people who are appointed to the ethics board, are people like Lisa Cupid.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So,
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. In Fayette County, Peachtree City had some projects like most cities do in the counties. The cities have their own projects, and then the counties have their projects. So it's separate lists of projects depending on jurisdiction. And Peachtree City actually had to admit that the numbers that they attached to some of those projects, the cost, were off by hundreds of percent. And so they essentially lied to the constituents about how much these projects were going to cost. But then once they acknowledged that they lied to the constituents, they said, we're going to build them anyway. And it's like, wait a minute. They voted on an absolute lie. You fed them a bunch of lies. They voted based on your lies. And now you're saying you're going to build it anyway. That's the way these governments operate, unfortunately.
Like in Cobb County, I know when they put these the county SPLOST, and I'll talk to people and get their feedback. And I talk to some people and says, well, I voted for it because I didn't want our parks to be run down. That was their thinking, that if we don't support this, then the quality of the infrastructure within the county will deteriorate, and that's not the case. We're not talking about not having good maintenance on facilities that already exist, but if you expand facilities, then you have to expand tax revenues to support those facilities, like we talked about earlier. So we need to, the private sector offers so much in the way of entertainment and venues, and we don't need to have that robust a public sector providing. Of course, there needs to be public parks. There are certain things that local and county government needs to do, but they don't have to be so ambitious. in
Right.
the process. You know, like
Well,
why should we have a municipal golf course? Okay, I mean, what's wrong with a privately owned golf course? You know, I just, you know, I don't know. I could go on forever.
well, what do you think this very expensive obsession is with metro governments wanting more and more mass transit options when the ridership numbers keep declining year over year? Why do you think they're so obsessed with this? Is this just leftist ideology, or are they being, uh, they're trying to urbanize, ultra urbanize the jurisdictions? What do you think is their obsession with just constantly trying to throw these projects on a referendum and get people to pass them?
Let me just take a brief go away from the camera for a second. I want to show you something from the newspaper. Hold on. I don't know if your viewers can see this. Okay, maybe
Yes.
it's not.
Yeah,
But it
we
says,
can see it.
it says, "Will a transit tax bring them back?" And then it shows this incredible decline in ridership since 2019. So
Right.
it's going down, 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 and they want to spend more and more money on something where there is a declining ridership and a declining demand. And the thing about mass transit is that modern technology, I mean, we're not only do we have Uber and Lyft, which I think are terrific, they really do provide a very needed and necessary service. And so mobility, the ability to get from point A to point B is robust within the metro area. And then you have WAMU, which is coming in there, which is self-driving cars. And once that technology gets advanced, then the price of that service will go down dramatically because you don't have to pay a driver, and the driver has to, like me, I have to pay for my own car insurance and my gas and maintenance of my car and all of those things I take on myself. Hopefully, I make enough money with Lyft to pay me for my overhead, and I get a little bit of a tax deduction as well. Um, but anyway, the private sector is robust. It's vigorous, and it's really doing a great job. And driving people around in buses, mass transit, that's technology which is relevant when it was in 1920, when the overwhelming majority of people didn't have access to their own private vehicle. So the landscape in technology and transit has changed dramatically over the last 100 years, but the people who want to expand mass transit are locked into a mindset which goes back over 100 years. And I don't
Yeah.
quite understand, Steve, why they think the way they do, or it boggles my mind. And I made the arguments over and over again, and I can't get through to them. But fortunately, I was able to get through to most of the people in Cobb County, and that's all that counts.
Well, I watch Cobb County transit buses when I'm driving in your area. They're mostly empty. And and here's the problem now. That is the least expensive way to move people in terms of mass transit are those buses. So why on earth, if the buses, which is your least expensive methodology and has more mobility because you can direct the buses on any street or highway that you want the route to go, if that's the most flexible way to do it, and they're not working, why would you want to make a fixed rail train that costs exponentially more money than those buses when you can't get the people to ride the most cheapest, flexible form of mass transit now?
Yeah, they have this thing called bus rapid transit, which is sort of a hybrid between rail and cars. And what they want to do is they want to set aside a portion of the lanes of major thoroughfares and dedicate them to those areas, which basically creates more congestion because there's less space for private automobiles. Well, you look on Cobb Parkway, like 2 or 3 thousand cars go through there every 2 or 3 minutes. But the buses, their capacity is a tiny fraction of that. And there are people who have uh, transit needs that can be met through a voucher program, which we already have in Cobb County. So if I need to get to the doctor or whatever through the county, I can arrange to have them meeting certain requirements, to have them pick me up, drop me off at the doctor or the grocery store, whatever it might be, and bring me back. And we can do it at a subsidized rate of about 90%. So if normally a service like that with Uber or Lyft would cost you maybe, $20, $30. This way it would cost you maybe $2 or $3. But the demand for that is going to be relatively small, and the price tag to the taxpayer is going to be very small as well. So we do need to consider the needs of people who are mobility challenged. I really do believe that. I don't want to be insensitive to that. But we can do it. We can do it in such a way that it's going to cost $11 billion. So
right, and you don't need an ultra expensive heavy rail train to do that either. You're talking about smaller vehicles that pick up people and take them direct routes A to B. That's all you have to do. But let's shift a little bit. Up until 2023, the Atlanta Braves baseball team was owned by a multi-billion-dollar media conglomerate known as Liberty Media. Now, here's the billion-dollar question for you. Why didn't Liberty Media pay the whole cost of the new ballpark without saddling half the cost on the Cobb County taxpayers' backs?
The answer is the corporate bottom line. If they could convince the local government, the county commissioners, to cough up $300 million, then that is money that Liberty Media Corporation doesn't have to pay. I mean, it was pure corporate greed. And I don't like to use the term corporate greed because, I know our left-wing friends love to talk about corporate greed, but that was corporate greed. That was basically saying, hey, we want this stadium. I have no problems with the stadium moving to Cobb County. I have no problems whatsoever. Go ahead, make it happen. I'm sure, and it does provide some economic benefit and development and growth in Cobb County. All well and good. But don't saddle the taxpayers of $300 million over 30 years to do that. That's wrong. It's called, I think the word is called theft.
Yes. I was going to use the term government negligence, but I mean, the fact that they would throw that type of burden onto the taxpayers without really even a lot of notice. That thing came out of the blue. There were quick votes on that thing from the Board of Commissioners. And there it was.
It was about 17 days or something along that line between the announcement and the county commissioner voted for it. And it was a 4-1 vote, by the way. So, it was only one person, and all the Republicans on that board, they were just so dazzled by Liberty Media. Say, you have no idea how wonderful this is going to be. And I just can't believe how gullible and everything that they were. But I fought it hard. I mean, I probably had about 15 or 16 television and radio interviews about that. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution was very much against it because they didn't want to see, the Braves move, from Atlanta to. So they really. I was a spokesperson. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Well, that stadium is located in what is called the Cumberland Community Improvement District, the Cumberland CID, and now the Cumberland CID is proposing that they want their own transit system around the ballpark, and they are willing to pay some money, but the money is only 15% of the total cost. So here we go. We're doing the same thing we did with the ballpark. Now they want to do it with transit for ballpark patrons. They want all of the taxpayers in Cobb County to pay 85% of a new transit system around the ballpark.
They have this system called circulators that go around the Cumberland. And actually, believe it or not, I was surprised to learn that they actually terminated or ending one of the circulator routes, which was a surprise to me. And by the way, the ATL, Atlanta Transit, what is that system? They had the express bus lines that come into the city from the suburbs. They've actually cut back because of COVID. They've reduced the amount of service by 50%, which was very surprising to me. I was really pleasantly surprised that they're willing to say, ridership is down so low that we need to reduce the amount of service to correspond with the amount of demand. So they are getting rid of one of the circulator routes, but these circulators go around, they're free, and nobody uses them. I mean, it's paid for out of hotel motel taxes. So when you go and you're in a hotel and you pay your bill, there's a $3 surcharge per night to pay for this circulator routes that nobody rides. And it's a travesty. It's a boondoggle. It's a huge. It's an obscene waste of money. And yeah,
they just love to compound things. And I saw too recently. I believe this was in January of this year. There was a news article. I think it was on WSB TV. And it said that the Board of Commissioners recently had to add security guards to a couple of the transit transfer stations. And so you've got an insufficient transit system, and the cost keeps going up now because now you're having to add full-time security guards in addition to the maintenance and the staffing of the buses and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the big things with MARTA was when they were talking about MARTA, when it finally got into Buckhead and in the Georgia 400 area, and people were talking about crime, and they're saying that's racist. You shouldn't talk about crime and using transit. Well, Cobb County has proven, because they created these transfer stations, it has now become a hub for crime, and they've had to hire full-time security guards. So if anything, we've proven the theory that these things do attract crime.
Well, I mean, I've used, public transit in Cobb County from time to time at various points in my years of living here, and I know that I felt very uneasy at the Marietta transfer station. There are people who are drinking and they accost you and they ask you for their panhandling and it's just I have an uneasy feeling. I'm a full-bodied, able-bodied male, and I can imagine what it must feel if I was a woman. I would feel much more vulnerable in those circumstances. So crime is an issue. Absolutely.
Well, I'm sure Cobb is like the rest of metropolitan Atlanta, and you're seeing sharp increases in home values, which then equate to sharp increases in property taxes. Is there any jurisdiction, the county, any of the cities who are actually trying to hold the taxes down that you know of?
Currently, no. Basically, what they do is they keep the millage rate the same, and if evaluations go up, then that same millage rate, you get a small tax increase because of increases in property values. And we were going through a really dramatic increase in property values. Right now, it's kind of leveled off a bit. Taxes were going up very dramatically. But I'll tell you a situation. I live in Austell, Georgia, and they have just passed a 158% tax increase, property tax increase. I mean, it boggles my mind.
What's their rationale for that type of increase?
If I knew, I would tell you. They basically say, well, we've been kicking the can down the road, and we have these new expenses, and our finances are in a shambles, and we just need more money to bring things together. The problem is that they got themselves in a situation where they were spending money like drunken sailors. And then the chickens came home to roost and were facing huge deficits. So their solution is not to address the reason why you had this situation arise, but simply raise taxes to cover your butt. And that's what happened. That's what happened. In fact, there's a good chance that I'm going to run for city council in Austell because I think we need a change in leadership. We need a perspective upon fiscal responsibility. I mean, just to give you one example, what happened is we had a chief of police who was hired 22 months ago, and he went on a spending spree like you wouldn't believe. He leased 24 squad cars for a town of 8,000. Where were the controls by the city council and by the mayor and said, hey, you can't do that? But he did it, and it was approved, and it was okay. Meanwhile, he was such an abusive leader of his department that retention went way down, and so the ability of the police department to do its job was seriously hampered. So it's a mess. It's a mess.
And you know, unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I talk to people all over metropolitan Atlanta. That story is not unique to Austell. It's happening all over metropolitan Atlanta. And it's just absolutely going insane. But I think we're getting into this. It used to be the federal government, the spending was always out of control. The state government would sometimes do some things they probably shouldn't have done. And your local government, you could always keep a lid on because you were there, you knew the people, you could keep an eye on what they were doing. Now the local governments are no better than the federal government. They're spending money just as wildly and as ambitiously as the federal government's doing.
Well, I think the crux of the problem is that there's a lack of citizen involvement on the local level. We're busy raising families and going to work, and our attention is not on local governance, and so the local government is doing whatever the heck they want to do, and the citizens are not calling them to account. And that's exactly what happened in Austell. Austell is a very extreme example of what I'm talking about, but it is endemic throughout the region. So if you want to keep a lid on government spending and keep strong fiscal controls, you need to go to the city council meetings. You need to go to county commissioner meetings. You need to be involved. Form an organization like I did. Cobb County Taxpayers Association, and let your elected officials know that you're not going to tolerate it. That old movie says, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And that's what we need to do.
Well, one of the greatest smoke and mirror actions that these local governments do, county or city, is they'll go tell the constituents, we did not increase the millage. We haven't increased the millage rate for your property taxes for the last 5 years. But they don't tell you that if you keep the millage rate the same and your property taxes continue to increase at a significant clip, you're getting a tax increase. And then people get their tax bills and they're going, well, wait a minute. They said they didn't increase the taxes. No, they said they didn't increase the millage rate. That does not mean your taxes are not going up. And so many people just don't know that, unfortunately.
There are some states, I believe Florida, I could be wrong, but there are some states where you kind of like, you're locked in. And so if your property values go up, your tax rate remains the same as far as the amount of money they tax. Then when you sell your property, then the next owner receives a much higher a tax valuation. And I think California had that under Proposition 13. I could be wrong. So that's something I think that maybe there's some reform that could be done in the state of Georgia or something like that. What do you think?
I think it's possible. And, we just had the legislation that passed that said that, about holding the rates in for a certain period of time and not being able to increase. But so many of the local governments opted out of that, they're right back to where they were. So I know in Fayette County, where I live, all the local governments, except for the Board of Education, did adopt the new law, and they are going to be under the restrictions. So we're going to see how that works out. They still want to spend lots and lots of money. I'll give you a perfect example. Peachtree City government, which I live in Peachtree City, so I'm ultimately familiar with what they're doing. They have $10 million of maintenance in arrears that they have no money to pay for, but yet they have proposed almost $150 million of new recreation projects. And simple logic would tell you, if you can't maintain the ones you have, to the tune of $10 million, and their total budget is $56 million. So if you've got $10 million of maintenance you can't even touch, why on earth are you going to build $150 million more in facilities that you won't be able to maintain? And that's just the lack of logic that I see with all these people who are new to politics, and they get on the board of commissioners or the city council. They say, I want to do these wonderful things. I'm all in favor of having a safe community. I'm all in favor of quality of life enhancements, but they don't know what they're doing. And they keep spending more and more and more money, deferring maintenance, deferring major capital things that need to be done to renovate current buildings and things. And they just keep adding to the debt. It's the federal government in a smaller scale.
It's like some of these local elected officials, they love to be seen in the newspapers where they're groundbreaking ceremonies.
Yes.
That's this project or that project. And they love to be seen, with a pick or a shovel in their hand, and they're moving earth, and they're saying, look what I'm doing.
Yes.
It's crazy. I mean, you talked about the Cumberland Improvement District, the CID. They have this, not just the regular circulator buses, but they've also had some sort of a bus that's, it's a remote bus. It moves around a certain route, and it goes around, and it's funded with quite a bit of money from the federal government, which is why our federal deficit is around $37 trillion,
right,
spending stuff like that. And the CID puts in a little bit of that, a little bit of that. Once they launched this program, Republican commissioners wanted to be seen in the public with the ribbon cutting. They wanted to see them being done. And I'm saying, how can you call yourself a conservative and do that? So I don't know what the solution is, Steve. I think we need people in public office that really care about what we care about and are willing to get into government and be elected and say, no, I'm not interested in showboating. I'm interested in running a tight, efficient, well-managed budget for the city or the county or the state or whatever it might be. I will say this. I think under Brian Kemp, I think we've done a pretty good job in managing state money. I mean, we're all going to be due for a tax refund of $500 for joint couples, and that's been continued. So I don't know what he's doing, but he seems to be doing a pretty good job. They're also bringing down the rate of the state income tax. It's being slowly going down. You're familiar with that process. So we have a surplus. We seem to be well managed on a state level. So I want to give a shout out to Governor Kemp on that. But when it comes to local and county and federal, not good. Not good.
Well, let me ask you this, Lance. If you're just the average household in metropolitan Atlanta, maybe a two working parent family, and you don't have a lot of time, you've got kids that you're taking to activities and everything else, but you're constantly tired of seeing your tax bill getting higher and higher and higher from your local governments, what would you suggest that they do? How do they find out what's going on in their community related to taxation? And then once they find out, what should they do to address the tax situation?
Well, I would say get involved with your local political organization. I would in Cobb County. I think that the Cobb County Republican Party is a good place to start. Start going to their meetings, attend their breakfasts, intermingle with the people who are, concerned about local and county taxes, and try to, affiliate yourself with these types of people. And then, like within the Cobb County, I can't speak for any other organization or county, but we have the Government Accountability Task Force, so you can get involved with that. There is a group called the Franklin Roundtable, which is also heavily involved. It used to be the Georgia Tea Party, and now that so there are organizations and people who are organized to represent the interests of taxpayers. They're out there. I'm sure if we've got them in Cobb County, they've got to be in Fayette County and other places. Find out. As a matter of fact, I gave a talk at the Fayette County Republican Party back a few months ago. So there are people who care, but you can't do it by yourself. You need to connect with other people who have your same interests and passion at heart.
Right.
So I don't, and then write letters to the editor, attend your council meetings, attend your the county commission meetings. And get up there. You're allowed to speak. I'm not big on social media because I'm an old guy, but social media is a great. Use Facebook and use Nextdoor and Instagram and all of those various emphasis, and get your opinions and your values out there. And you'll be surprised how many people share your frustrations and want to work with you to help. That's a little bit of a pep talk, but you know something? It worked when we fought the mobility SPLOST. We were able to galvanize people. As a matter of fact, we ordered up 5,000 lawn signs. When they came in, there were so many of them that I was panicking. Like, how am I going to get these out there? Well, through the Cobb County Republican Party and other venues, before you know it, the demand for those lawn signs was, I was working full time, 40 hours a week, running around and distributing lawn signs to people who wanted those lawn signs. By the time the campaign was over, the whole county was covered in our lawn signs, and the other side had hardly any lawn signs out. So, and we did sign waving, and we did, we put together an ad and we put it out on a text. And I could talk to you forever about all the many steps that we took, but it can be done. If you're asking me, what can you do? Form your own organization, affiliate yourself with people who are already active and involved, and you can make a difference.
And it only takes 10 or 12 minutes to look up the email addresses of your city council or your board of commissioners, and at least, at a minimum, send them an email expressing your displeasure and why you're displeased with what they're doing, and ask them not to do it. So oftentimes, if they hear from 70 or 80 people, that's a major big deal for an elected official. Generally, they hear from no one.
And another thing I'd add to that is that they do something right, let them know that too. Yeah. You need to give them a pat on the back and say, hey, thank you for your vote against this or that. Because it can be a very thankless job. If all you're doing, you're just hearing from people who are disgruntled.
Absolutely. Well, Lance, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Do you have the website address for the Cobb Taxpayers Association if somebody wants to look it up?
Sure. It's www.cobbtaxpayer.com. Very simple.
Awesome. Very good.
Communicate with us any way, shape, or form. We've got a lot of stuff on there with all our campaigns and media and everything else. So if you're in Cobb County, especially if you're in Austell, we welcome your support and your involvement.
That would be awesome. And, we appreciate you doing this. Thanks for setting the example for the rest of metropolitan Atlanta. And following this interview, we're going to do a little vintage clip that I did on mass transit for Gwinnett and Cobb County for their referendums. The information on there, it probably dates back to 2017, but it's just as accurate today as it was in 2017 in terms of why you shouldn't spend an outrageous amount of money on these mass transit projects. Thank you, Lance. Appreciate you.
And Steve, send me a link of this interview so I can pass it on to my peeps.
We'll do it.
Okay. All right, man. Thanks. I enjoyed it. Okay.
All right, bye.
We have a lot to talk about. The regional government assured the public that transit ridership would grow by a whopping 40% in Atlanta from 2000 to 2025. Ridership has actually declined. Peter Rogoff of the Federal Transit Administration stated in 2012 that there was more than $78 billion in deferred maintenance costs for public transit agencies across the nation. Both Gwinnett and Cobb counties had explosive suburban growth with an over-reliance on the interstate highway system. We are not going to tear those counties down and start over. We should not expect billions of dollars of transit infrastructure thrown into the mix to solve the traffic congestion. The 2012 region-wide mass transit T-SPLOST vote lost in every county, even the MARTA counties. Citizens were lied to. The transit projects were astronomically expensive, and there was no real benefit to building any of them. Regional leaders had to admit there was no revenue source identified for operations and maintenance of the costly transit expansion. A leading pro-transit expert, Christopher Lineberger, admitted that the billions of dollars in taxes was about real estate development rather than relieving traffic congestion. The leadership at the state, region, and current MARTA counties have made it clear that the current system is not sustainable and that the state and the entire metro region needs to pay the bills. MARTA needs Gwinnett's money, not their transit riders. Former MARTA General Manager Beverly Scott honestly and accurately described the transit system as, quote, a $6 billion investment operating at 30% of its design capacity, end quote. MARTA is not a good partner for financial accountability. A recent investigative report from Channel 2 Action News questioned MARTA's competence to manage transit construction projects, and the agency has been operating for 40 years. We have all heard the lie that millennials want to use transit instead of cars. They were supposed to revitalize the ridership of mass transit. They are now the largest growth segment of the automotive industry. Please tell the truth about mass transit. First, mass transit subsidies are not increasing ridership. Large taxpayer transit subsidies have not reduced traffic congestion. Transit subsidies do not reduce air pollution. Mass transit is not energy efficient. Taxpayer transit subsidies are used to benefit real estate developers. And regrettably, transit-oriented developments do more to displace the poor than help them. We are looking at faulty logic. The MARTA system and the Atlanta streetcar have consistent declining ridership and horrible finances. And the pro-transit lobby keeps telling us the answer is to spend even more money and make it bigger. Gwinnett and Cobb already have a more cost-efficient and well-run bus system than MARTA has now. What is the rationale for merging with MARTA? The most notable transit systems across the country are also losing ridership and lots of money. What's the allure of following a model that is failing everywhere and does not reduce traffic congestion? Seriously, why would Gwinnett and Cobb taxpayers have different expectations? When MARTA and the other major transit systems are consistently losing ridership and constantly asking for more money, what is the incentive to waste billions of local dollars that could be used for significant road improvements? So here's the truth about the March 19 referendum. Over 90% of Gwinnett citizens will pay an extraordinary sum for a service they will not use and will not benefit from. The referendum calls for added taxes till 2057, but the infrastructure will have to be funded in perpetuity. There will be no decrease in traffic congestion, and billions of dollars will be pulled from the local economy. History shows rail transit is a poor performer. Regional leaders intend for Gwinnett and Cobb taxes to fund transit in other counties. It's just ridiculous when MARTA's CEO puts out a public call for an additional $100 billion of investment in transit with the dismal numbers they are posting. That's just incredibly arrogant. Ask yourself why the government will not present a cost per rider analysis on mass transit. You could literally create a significant managed lane system on the main arterial highways and a Gwinnett-run local bus system at a much lower cost and receive an exponentially higher benefit. Pro-MARTA expansion groups will not tell you the ridership is declining. They will not give you a cost per rider figure because it's outrageous. They will not tell you that local governments and the state are putting in more money taxpayer dollars into MARTA with no improvement in ridership or any other metric. They will not tell you that long-term transit maintenance costs are piling up. I cannot understand why anyone would want to tie into a system that cannot live up to any of its promises. You know, that's a really good question. And let me tell you, across the country, there's not a single model that we can point to that's working well. And I don't know why we'd want to emulate any of them. Portland, Oregon, for example, the darling of transit, they spent $2.5 billion on additional rail services, and their ridership either declined or stayed the same through a multi-year period. $2.5 billion, nothing to show for it. Then you've got DC Metro Rail. They are in dire straits. Washington Post had a detrimental argument related to what they are trying to do. They're messing up on maintenance costs. The ridership is declining sharply, and they're the second largest transit system in the United States. Then we've got the New York subway system, the vaulted New York subway system. They're losing ridership year over year. And they also have a host of very expensive maintenance issues. A lot of these people are deferring to the ride sharing programs, and that's probably what we should be looking at. Then you've got the almost comical California high-speed rail project. They started off promising the citizens of California that project would cost $15 billion. The latest estimate was $213 billion. Luckily, Gavin Newsom cut the cord and said that they weren't going to do the leg between Oakland and California. They weren't going to do the Bay Area part of the high-speed rail. And good for him, because that was going to be a noose around California's neck. And it was going to literally kill them off. There's no way they could afford that project. So, you know, it's good, too, that we also do need to talk about the Jimmy Carter Boulevard transit-oriented development that they're going to do in Gwinnett. It's planned, I think it's going to be about 15 years out they're talking about. But let me tell you what the honest truth is about that. That area is a traffic quagmire. We all know that. But the development itself is going to build just tons and tons of apartments there, high-density residential. Those developers are going to get all kinds of subsidies. They're going to make all kinds of money. And let me tell you, the developers are probably going to be the only people that win with that development. Most of the people that are in those apartments are not going to ride the transit. How do I know that? Well, go back and look at some of the other transit-oriented developments. Lindbergh, for example, in the MARTA system. That's their oldest, most tried and true TOD, transit-oriented development. Only 22% at most of the people that live in all those apartments use the transit. The other people, they're bringing their car. They're driving everywhere they're going to go. Imagine what all those thousands of people who are added into the mix in their cars are going to do to traffic congestion on Jimmy Carter Boulevard and beyond. You know, another good point, it wouldn't be fair to just give all the criticism and not offer any solutions, and let's do that. Let's offer some solutions. First one, managed lanes. We're already seeing the managed lane project in Cobb County paying big dividends. If you can put those people in a managed lane and you direct them and they're out of the main traffic and they're going to a premier destination without all the stops along the way, yes, you do have to pay something for that. But a lot of people are taking advantage of that, and that is opening up a lot of capacity on the highways. Great solution, managed lanes. And I know they're coming to Gwinnett too. Unfortunately, we're going to have this vote before we see what happens with the managed lanes. Autonomous technology. Autonomous technology is coming, and we need to get ready for it. Now, what happens? It's going to revolutionize our life, just like our smartphones and everything else, the internet, the way everything else is modified, the way we live and the way we conduct our lives. It's coming. One of the things that we're looking forward to is autonomous tractor trailer traffic. One of the biggest problems you have in Gwinnett and Cobb and everywhere else that has an interstate highway is that tractor trailer traffic. You know, when you put in the cushions in the front and the rear of that traffic, you're looking at about a 5-car consumption of capacity for each tractor trailer. It's just insane. And then when you hear the words overturned tractor trailer on the radio, you know you are not going to work anytime soon. So what we need to do is look at autonomous technology for those tractor trailers and try to run those things at night on that highway. And the beautiful thing about it is it's at the perfect time in our space right now. The tractor trailer industry is having a hard time getting long haul drivers. A lot of the drivers currently are over the age of 45 to 50, and they are going to be working their way out, retiring out of the system. We need some way to haul that freight. That's the lifeblood of our economy. Lastly, ride share. We already know Uber, Lyft, and all the other ones. They are a huge success, multi-billion-dollar companies. Let's work on that ride share program and actually get it so we don't have to go through an Uber or a Lyft. We can take people who work in the same office complexes, same geographical areas, who maybe might park in the same parking decks or parking lots, and try to work out more ride sharing amongst our citizens and have them take themselves. You could have an actual payment that could be a transaction on the internet. That person could collect some money for actually riding the share. There would have to be no money exchange. It could all be done electronically. And then if that person had to leave early, the person who had to drive or the person who was the passenger had to leave early, then you could connect through the internet with another person and drive back, or connect with Uber, Lyft, whatever. But those are great solutions that are coming up. Some of them already exist. Well, you know, another good point, we've always heard in the last couple of years that, hey, MARTA's financial situation has improved dramatically. Well, if it has, then why are people in Fulton and DeKalb demanding, and I'm talking about elected officials, demanding that other counties start paying for some of these debts? For one thing, MARTA has refinanced some of their debt. There's a savings for that. Yeah, God bless them. I'm glad they're doing that. They need to be doing that. That's being cost conscious. But in reality, what they're doing is they're consuming more in taxes. Tax revenues have been increased. The economy is roaring. Things are looking good for right now. That means more one-penny sales tax for MARTA from the MARTA counties. But the problem with that is they're getting more of our taxes, but there's no improvement in the outcome. They are still with declining, pathetic rider numbers. They still have a maintenance backlog that they're not addressing. So to say I've got $120 million in reserves, I don't know really where that gets us. The system is not getting any better. There's no improvement in what the services they're supposed to be providing. So yeah, I'm glad that they're getting more taxes for a short period of time. I'm glad they've been able to refinance some debt and save some money, but where are the rewards for all that? We're supposed to see some sort of continued improvement in outcome when they get more money. Not happening. They're still way under capacity in terms of ridership. And when you see a MARTA bus that has a capacity of somewhere around 60 passengers and there's 2 people in the bus, are we supposed to be happy that they're getting more of our taxes?